entitled "Shopper Blocks Store Traffic," then yells at me. This happened a few days ago, so it's fresh in my memory. I'm lucky enough to not have a lot of these stories, but this encounter stuck out to me because of how sudden and jarring it was. Context: I, 24, bigender and accepting any pronouns, though I present as female, given my larger chest that I have no desire to get rid of, work at a TJ Maxx/home goods combo store. And my main job is either unpacking boxes in the back or retrieving the trolleys from the corrals. On occasion, however, if there are no boxes to be processed and it's too hot to get trolleys, I get very easily overheated, and my managers are more than all right with me helping out in other areas when it's hot. I'll usually take the bins of pet stuff from the back room and one at a time go through each bin, putting toys and treats on the hooks and laying out pet beds and such. Because I don't want to block traffic too much, and because there are 3 or 4 aisles total that make up the department requiring me to move back and forth a lot anyway, I don't like to roll the bins into the aisles themselves, and instead keep them under one of the tables we have on display, or otherwise out of the way if the table gets sold. But generally, when I'm working the pet department, I'm doing a lot of back and forth through the aisles, and I acknowledge that traffic can be high sometimes, so I always preface my movements with a polite, "Sorry, excuse me, pardon me," etc. If I ever find that I have to accommodate shoppers, and 99% of the time they're more than happy to step off to the side, often apologizing in turn, to which I always reply that it's no problem. I'll only be section. I've never had any issues with this before, as I'm typically a very non-confrontational person and am generally easy to get along with unless you attack me personally. QR seen a few days ago. The cast. Me equals me, the part-time employee just trying to do my job. EL equals entitled lady. MH equals my hero, the person who stood up for me. I was putting away some pet beds and came around the corner to head back to the bin to grab more stuff to put out, and I see this person, EL, with her cart in the dead center of the aisle, perpendicular to another aisle, therefore blocking the entire T section that just so happened to be the center point of my traffic. She's sitting on her phone, and I assume she's just stopped for a moment to send a quick text, so I politely wait behind her for a minute or two to give her time to finish her text and move on. After waiting for what seemed like a reasonable amount of time, I cleared my throat gently to get her attention, as I didn't just want to shove by her or tap her on the shoulder or anything, and our initial exchange goes something like this. Me, "Excuse me, ma'am? May I please squeak by for just a second?" EL glares at me and moves her cart approximately 2 inches. I wait for a moment, confused, but after I realize that she expects my round potato body to fit through that small gap, I figure if that's all she'll give me, it's no big deal. She'll probably move on soon anyway. So I press myself against the shelves to try and put as much distance between myself and her as possible, out of respect, and manage to squeeze by so I can get to my bin, apologizing profusely as I do so. I pick up a few random items from the bin, then turn back towards the aisles. EL has returned her cart to the exact same position it was in before she moved to let me by, still sitting on her phone and not looking like she'll move anytime soon. I don't think much of it, and resolve to try and work around her as best I can, assuming it must be a pretty important text exchange for her to drop everything in the middle of the aisle to do so. Fortunately, there are other ways to get to the aisles I need, but at this point other customers are glaring at EL because they're trying to get from point A to point B using the most convenient route, which EL has now been blocking for going on 10 minutes, and are being forced to maneuver their carts around the long way. Some of them give pointed stares to me as if saying that I was the employee. I should say something, so I try to approach the conversation gently and tactfully, standing a little off to the side of the EL's cart and thinking through what I'm going to say to try and keep things civil and not to cause a huge argument. I finally gather my courage and gently clear my throat again. Me, "Excuse me, dash." No sooner had the words left my mouth, I hadn't even begun to ask her to kindly move off to the side where there was plenty of room, and she wouldn't have to leave the area or stop her texting for more than a second or two to slide over so people could still get by. I didn't get a chance to say any of that as this woman suddenly snaps at me. "EL, I'm shopping, you're working? You're going to have to wait." I just kinda stood there and stared at her in shock for a moment, unsure of what just happened. Her sudden hostility when I had been nothing but polite, and in fact had barely begun to speak, just stunned me into silence. That and the fact that I was trying to work out her logic that her texting or whatever was somehow more important than my job. Like, what? I stammered an apology and hurriedly left the scene, feeling that all too familiar feeling well inside my chest. For some background, I have moderate PTSD from past experiences growing up, and being startled or screamed at is one of my triggers. So when people suddenly snap at me like this, it tends to send my body into flight mode and sends my anxiety skyrocketing, which in turn causes me to cries of fear response. Oddly enough, if I know I'm in the wrong, this response doesn't happen, as my brain is able to rationalize why I'm being yelled at. But when I'm scolded for apparently no reason, it does send me back to those darker days. I didn't want to burst into tears in the middle of the store, so when I felt myself start to lose control of my emotions, I retreated to the break room to give myself 5 minutes to calm down. When I returned to the sales floor, the first thing I notice is the sounds of more yelling, but not at me. I return to my place in the pet department, but as I approach, I see the EL having a heated argument with an older gentleman, MH. I couldn't catch all of their conversation and some details are fuzzy, but it was going something like this. EL, spoiled youths who think they own the place. MH, I watched the whole thing, madam, and that young lady was nothing but polite and respectful. It's you who thinks they own the place by parking your cart in the middle of the aisle. You're creating an obstacle not only for the poor employee who's just doing her job, but for the other customers as well. If you could just scoot over a smidge or dash. EL, I'm busy. I don't have time for nonsense. These people need to respect my space and move around me. There are other ways they can go. At this point, I'm curious and also flattered that someone thought to speak up for me, so I kinda hide behind a shelf to watch all this go down. MH continues. MH, you had no right to snap at her like that. I bet the poor thing is bawling her eyes out wondering what she did to deserve it. Honestly, if that were me, I would have given you an earful, but since that kind young lady was too polite to do so herself, I'll give you one now. Move your damn cart out of the way. EL was getting red in the face and people were staring. I tried to make myself small so people wouldn't notice I was watching, but when one of my coworkers saw me, they walked over and asked if that was the lady who upset me. I told them it was, and they approached the arguing pair and instructed the lady to leave the store or else they would call the police to have her removed. A mostly empty threat, but it was enough to make her walk off in a huff. I finally came out of hiding and MH saw me and asked if I was okay. I told him I was and thanked him for standing up for me. He told me that after seeing a lot of young people being disrespectful in his time, it was refreshing to see one who had such good manners and that he wasn't going to stand for the mistreatment of a rare soul like mine. He then politely excused himself and returned to his shopping. I went back to sorting the pet stuff with a spring in my step. Haven't seen the EL again since then, but MH does pop by once in a while and will sometimes bring his dog and is more than happy to let me pet her. TLDR. An entitled lady snapped at me for politely asking her to move her cart out of the middle of the aisle after she had been blocking it for 10 minutes, calls me spoiled, until heroic older gentleman leaps to my defense. Now to the next story, Story 2. Story of my entitled downstairs neighbor. So last July, my boyfriend, 23, and I, 24 non-binary, moved into a second-story apartment in a complex. All was fine until about 2 weeks in. I get a call from the office about a noise complaint from my downstairs neighbor, DN. I've never received a noise complaint in my life, so I'm kind of taken aback. The office manager at the time tells me that DN didn't give any information about what the noises she heard were, or what time they occurred or anything. Whatever, I try to move on with my life. Until mid-September. I'm trying to dye my hair at about 10 p.m. Boyfriend goes to grab something for me from another room, moves my desk chair to the side, and suddenly bang, bang, bang. DN was banging a broomstick on her ceiling/my floor to make us shut up. This obviously annoys us, but we let it go, finish up my hair, and go to bed. Except this continues for weeks. If we drop something, banging. Walk across the apartment, banging. Sit down too hard, banging. Desk chair rolls across the hardwood floor, banging. In early November, BF catches COVID and stays home for a few days. One night he gets up to get some NyQuil and accidentally drops the bottle. The next day, we were visited by 2 staff members from the office about another noise complaint about loud banging in the middle of the night. We deny this and inform them of the banging from DN. It's kind of dismissed, and we're told to get it on camera. At this point, since we're being banged at almost every day, I'm starting to have really bad mental health effects because of it. We're pretty much constantly whispering and walking on our tiptoes, and every loud noise nearly sends me into an anxiety attack. We're looking for reasons to not be home, and being home makes me depressed and anxious. I'm equating my emotions to a child in an abusive household. So about a week later, I write the complex an email where I specified multiple times we were banged at, emphasized my emotions and how I felt like we were being harassed and that I didn't feel safe confronting DN in person myself. In fact, while I was writing the email, DN banged up at us over me dropping something. This email went unanswered for a week. During this week, my cat, 17F, fell out of a chair and DN banged up at us again. I had an anxiety attack and BF got fed up with everything and went to confront DN. I made sure to tell him to record the conversation on his phone, and if things with her started to escalate, to just leave and come back upstairs. He came back frustrated. DN had basically whined to him that she had a migraine and could hear everything we're doing up there, and declined to have any real conversation with him but agreed to stop banging up at us. A few days later, I physically went to the office, which is annoying since it's like half a mile uphill from my building, to bring up the issue since no one answered my email. I spoke to the same office workers from before and paraphrased what I'd written in my email and told them about what happened before with BF and DN. They offered to set up a meeting where they listened from DN's apartment to hear what noises were being made, because at this point we didn't know what exactly her noise complaints were about, as we'd still been given little to no information, while someone stays upstairs with us while we make normal life noises. I agreed to it, but later learned that DN denied. However, 2 weeks later, I get a call at like 10 a.m. that the office people would be by at 2 p.m. to do the noise inspection. They show up like an hour late, and instead of having us make noise and stuff like I expected, the property manager and an office worker come up and I tell them about some things I think might be causing the noise, like creaky flooring and some doors sticking. They try to fix the doors, it doesn't really work, and then basically push aside my concerns about the harassment and tell us to just be considerate, mind the quiet hours from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., and call the courtesy officer if there are any issues at night. I want to emphasize that we do not stomp, bang things around, have loud arguments, throw parties, drag furniture around, anything like that. All BF and I do is come home from work, watch TV or play video games, make dinner, and go to bed. My elderly cat does kind of stumble or fall to the ground instead of jumping, but she weighs like 7 pounds and she's not very active, and honestly I think she's probably loudest when she uses the litter box, but the only complaints we've received regarding noise from her have been about her jumping all over everything. We even bought a $50 rug to put under our desk chairs to try and muffle some of the noise from them. We tried to be quieter when the noise complaints came in. I feel like we've been considerate, but nothing's been good enough for DN. It genuinely felt like she wanted us to float around our apartment or something. I hoped at this point things would calm down. We stopped hearing banging, which was good. There were a few nights where I heard loud yelling from my next-door neighbors, which I recorded some of because I knew that if DN heard it, she'd attribute it to us. Then a few weeks later, we got an email from the property manager threatening us with a lease violation and a fine if we didn't stop with the noise. Obviously, we were angry, tired of being harassed and vilified for just existing in our apartment. So we responded to the property manager, expressing our displeasure, explaining that we still haven't really been given info on what exactly the noise is or when it's occurring. We also threatened legal action. The property manager, PM, changed her tune very fast. She told us that her email was a cursory one that she always sends with noise complaints, even though what she sent was very much personalized to our situation, and informed us that the noises reported were banging, moving furniture, and loud arguing. I tell her that I have video proof that the arguing was not us, and we decide to schedule a meeting to talk to PM about it the following week, and until then she won't issue us with any lease violations. During one night before this meeting, literally spent the evening being as quiet as possible. We ate leftovers, built a Lego set in bed together, watched TV with the volume so low we could only follow along with subtitles, and went to bed by 10 p.m. Neither of us got up during the night. The next day, PM told us that DN had reported we were particularly loud the night before. Anyway, at the meeting with PM, I showed her the video I'd taken of my next-door neighbors arguing, brought up how it says in the lease that everyday noises from other apartments are expected, and the leasing office cannot be expected to stop them from penetrating your apartment. I also reiterated how I felt like we were being harassed by DN and how my mental health had tanked because of it. We finished it off with how we needed this problem fixed, otherwise we expected to be let out of our lease with no fees attached for all the trouble caused to us. After hearing all this, PM confided that DN was making multiple reports about us a week and honestly seemed a little Karenish. She wondered briefly if DN was being homophobic/transphobic toward us, or if she was just so self-absorbed in herself that she wasn't thinking about the fact that we too are human beings with lives. PM said she would talk to the complex's courtesy officer because apparently he wasn't doing his job correctly. He'd told DN to call 911 on us about the noise instead of observing the noise claims from her apartment, and that she wouldn't be hitting us with a lease violation unless there was undeniable proof, i.e. the courtesy officer's agreement, that we were being unnecessarily loud. We went on our way, hoping everything would be fine. However, in February, I got new upstairs neighbors, and as they were moving in, the noise level rose. I didn't mind this. They were moving in. There was going to be noise. I just put in some earbuds and ignore it like a reasonable person, but DN somehow heard all of it and decided to start banging up at us again. Instead, this time, it was just one heavy thunk that literally shook my floor. It was like she'd thrown something heavy at the ceiling or something. I let it go and made a note of it in my head in case it continued after upstairs finished moving. And it did. Around the beginning of March, I sent an email to PM letting her know of all the times we'd been banged at and what we were doing when it occurred. This email went unanswered. We went up to the leasing office to get a package a few days later and ran into PM where she explicitly told us that she'd ignored my email because she was so busy with all the construction going on in the complex, she just didn't have the energy for it. She also suggested that the bangs from DN might have actually been the door to the stairs that's next to my apartment falling shut, but I know it's not that because the door's quieter and doesn't shake my floor. So that was really annoying, but at this point we decided to move at the end our lease anyway, so whatever. There were a couple more banging incidents that I'd emailed about where PM gave very generic responses until finally she informed us that DN would be moving soon. Since then there hasn't been any more banging, so I was assuming either DN gave up or PM finally did something to make her stop. Yet, a few days ago, I was checking the Google reviews for my complex since they'd been emailing us, asking us to leave good reviews, and I saw DN had left a nice long 1-star mentioning the situation with us. I'm going to go ahead and quote it here because I think this is where the real entitlement comes in. Our neighbors above us have been a nightmare, and you can hear every step among slamming things on the floor, cat jumping off things all the time, furniture moving, and all throughout the day and night. It has been a mix of our neighbors being truly inconsiderate and the apartment not installing the correct subflooring in between the levels. When we complained to the complex several times every week for a while about the extreme level of noise for a while, the manager, PM's name, claimed she would take care of it, and it even got to a point where she told me their next violation would come with a charge. She backed out of that claim the next week and instead instructed me to start calling Courtesy Patrol, even though I had video proof like they asked me to obtain in order for them to follow through with violation, and said that if he lets them know noise level is extreme, that they would only then charge them with violation. It felt like they were questioning our integrity. I've never had to provide video proof to another complex when situations arose. Other complexes I've lived at in our city have always done their due diligence and at least contacted the other party when issues came up. When courtesy officer came out, he would usually be in a different part of our city and would take him a bit to get to the property. He would always go outside the neighbor's door and wouldn't listen to the noise from our apartment to truly understand how loud they were being. He was always very rude when I spoke to him also. I eventually gave up. A few things. I do believe the part about the subflooring to be true. There are some super creaky parts on my floor, but that's not our fault, and we shouldn't be expected to change our home life to accommodate her comfort. Even though we try to be quiet, and we spent money trying to dampen some of the noise. But sure, we're being truly inconsiderate. I would love to see what video proof she has, but I bet it's just my next-door neighbors arguing since things didn't really ramp up until after that. And I proved that wasn't us. The whole comment about feeling like the complex was questioning her integrity and that other complexes have always just taken her word for it. So she'd done this kind of thing before. Girl, if you don't want to have to hear your neighbors around you, buy a house. Or at least get an apartment on the top floor. Also, we have been in constant contact with the complex since December. I don't know why she's trying to imply that they haven't contacted us. What do you mean the courtesy officer has been standing outside our door and listening in on us? I know that's not Deanne's fault, but holy shit, that feels so weird. Love that she conveniently left out the part where she got away with banging up at us for months. So yeah, that's about where I stand now. At the time of writing this, she's still down there, and we're moving at the end of next month. I'm praying that nothing else happens. Sorry for how long this is, I just really needed to get this out. If you made it this far, thanks for reading, I guess.